Shit.
Let's try this again, shall we? What can you say? Welcome back to the Just Mets podcast, a live edition of the Midweek Show, brought to you by the Believe Podcast Network. My name is Rich MacLeod. I'm here with you moments after the New York Mets are swept in a 4-game series by the Chicago Cubs. They go 0-7 against the Cubs in the season series in 2026. You'll remember that the Mets went 0-7 against the Cubs in the regular season in 2015. Something tells me they're not going to have a similar revenge tour later in the season against Chicago. I genuinely, what is there to say? This baseball team, I think we've all known to some extent, has been dead for most of this year. And I think a lot of us have started to fully come to that conclusion for good in the last maybe week or two. Just seeing that, hey, it's not getting better. Doesn't matter if they're 5-6 games back in the wild card, the whole league is. And I think we've all just started to accept that reality. But I think you can firmly say that this series against the Chicago Cubs at Citi Field this past week is the final death knell in the awful, disastrous, unmitigated disaster of a 2026 season for the New York Mets. This is the series that officially put them down for good. We'll talk about it a little bit. It's the series that caused them to push their first button in terms of what direction they're going to head, because they traded David Peterson late on Wednesday night, ironically, to the Cubs while they were still playing against them. We did not see David Peterson in the series finale because just not his day to throw. He just pitched on Sunday in Philly. And we sit here with these New York Mets that we continue to watch against our better judgment, I would say. I mean, it's 10:40 p.m. on a Thursday night talking about a team that is now 13 games under 500, and there's several hundred of you watching this live and more of you listening to it later. We still care to some extent, I guess. I will say I'm annoyed by it. It bothers me. I call out the nonsense, and we'll call out how bad this is and how many people are at fault and who they are and all that stuff. But emotionally, I feel like I cannot be hurt by this, at least this year's team, at any point for the rest of the year. You know, the season died so fast, so early. And yeah, we tried to hang on to that belief that, oh, it's early and look what happened in 2024 and look at the 2019 Nationals. And, you know, you can point to as many examples as you want. The Guardians last year were 15 games out of first place and look what they wound up doing. I can hear all of it. Like, we never really believed, most of us. We've seen too much. Even if you're, people who know me won't believe this, but I have had a newfound wave of positivity in my approach to sports and attempting to make it with life. And the Knicks just winning a championship, me seeing the first professional championship of my lifetime as a sports fan, has definitely impacted the way I view it as well. Even with all that, like, you can be positive and optimistic and still also be realistic and be able to call out a team that you know is not any good. And sometimes our sports teams are just bad. There's no, I don't want to hear about bad luck with this team. Yeah, they haven't had the greatest luck, but I don't think they've had the worst luck either. Outside of the Lindor and Soto alternating injuries and Clay Holmes breaking his leg, who has gotten hurt on this team this year that you are remotely surprised got hurt? Jorge Polanco, the guy who's known for getting injured every year, or is it Luis Robert, who's the guy that's known for getting injured every year? These are two of the major replacements of the offseason, by the way, and we're not going to relitigate who the Mets let go, but I think the big thing that you can call out is I was fine with shaking up the core, but who are you going to replace them with? The replacements could have been better. And I mean, look at the replacements. Bo Bichette, yeah, he's hitting a little bit better lately. Who does anybody care? He's just, working on he'll be working on stat padding for his next contract. And that's nothing against him. It's not solely his fault that the Mets are in this place. He's a large contributor to that, of course, but Bo Bichette is at a largely miserable year. Freddie Peralta pitched well in the finale until he didn't, but most of that was his defense. The defense, my God, the defense, we'll get to that in a second. Freddie Peralta has not had a good season with the Mets. We talked about Polanco and Robert just now. And Devin Williams he's been okay. But, a lot of these guys that they brought, Marcus Semien, how could I forget about Marcus Semien, who just had the most conveniently timed IL stint I've ever seen, less than 12 hours after committing 2 errors in a single game. And this is the guy that's supposed to be all glove and no bat, and somehow he's no glove and no bat. So another sick addition by our pal David Stearns, who did speak this week. And honestly, I don't know. Did anybody have any takeaways from that? I listened to the whole thing. I reread the quotes today. The only thing that caught my eye, and I don't even think it's actually that interesting, is just when he was asked about Steve Cohen. All he really said was, Steve Cohen's frustrated. We're all frustrated. Like, team's not where we thought they would be. No shit. Like, David Stearns is not going to say anything that's going to be of interest to me, probably for the rest of this year. Maybe never. Most GMs or execs are not going to be honest in public, and to some extent, they shouldn't be. Half their job is posturing and negotiating, even when you're not negotiating. But yeah, I don't know. There's nothing. I was originally going to come into this and let's play some clips from the David Stearns presser and react to some of them, and it just did nothing for me. I don't know about you guys, and we'll definitely spend a lot of time going through the chats. It looks like people are somewhat riled up tonight, and rightly so, after watching the just absolute, complete, utter nonsense at Citi Field over these last couple of days. Mets have lost 6 in a row now in total, but they get swept by the Cubs. They got swept in the doubleheader as well on Wednesday, which is very hard to get swept in a doubleheader in general. Most of the time, it seems like teams split. Not the first time the Mets have been swept in a doubleheader this year at home. The Rockies did it to them as well. So, yeah, I mean, they're 13 games under 500. Gary Cohen said it on the broadcast. It's the Mets' worst record at this point in a season since 2018. For those who have the unfortunate burden of remembering the 2018 Mets season, it was bad. That was the last of the 2 Mickey Callaway years. I think you had Zach Scott, maybe, and Jared Porter at that time, if I'm remembering my Mets shitty timelines correctly. No, I think that was still Brody Van Wagenen, actually. Good Lord. So think about that. This Mets team is in a very similar position. This Mets team that is one of the most expensive teams, not just in Major League Baseball, but the history of Major League Baseball, had huge expectations coming into this year and is coming off a year where they collapsed and just missed the playoffs. So God knows they're going to be good this year because they have to be. They are comparable to the Brody Van Wagenen, Mickey Callaway, Robert Gesellman led 2018 Mets. Boy, I'm gonna have a drink after that. My God. We won't fully go through the 4 games because honestly, like, does anybody care about the game by game at this point? I think we just kind of want to vent about this team and then talk about what's next, and we'll talk about the trade again. So honestly, we'll do the Cliffs Notes here. Game 1, they lose 9-6. Senga was fucking awful. Oh my God, he was so bad. Led to me. I was recording a Patreon exclusive podcast in the middle of the game on Tuesday night. That was Tuesday, the first game of the series. And the whole thing was like a mailbag for those who aren't subscribed to our Patreon. I do a mailbag, trying to do one a month going forward. So just answering questions that our subscribers left us on the Patreon and the Substack. And before I get into the questions, Senga had just given up 5 runs in like 2 innings against the Cubs. So I was like, let me vent about Senga. This can be a social clip that everybody gets to see, even if they're not subscribed to the Patreon episodes. And as I'm in the middle of this like quick, I think 4 or 5 max minute rant about Senga, I glance over to my TV to my right, which is normally off when I'm recording these. Of course, it's on right now. But I left it on Tuesday because normally I would never be recording anything during an actual game. And as I'm finishing my Senga rant, I glance over to the right. And the second I look over, I see the crack of the bat and it goes over the wall. And it's another home run that Senga gives up. So I reacted to that live as I was mid-rant about said pitcher. So that was insane. He was awful. He gives up 7 runs and what did he go? 3 innings, 3 2/3, maybe 4 innings. Not good. I can tell you that much. Yeah, he went 3 2/3, gave up 3 hits, walked 5 guys, 7 runs, all earned. They don't hit the score. It was really like a 9-3 game. They 9-2. They scored a bunch of runs late to make it look a little bit closer, but largely the Met offense wasn't good in that game. Game 2, you're up 3-0. That game was 0-0 for a while. Nolan McLean, I got blamed for it from the Just Mets accounts that I jinxed it, and maybe I did. I don't really believe in that stuff, but maybe I jinxed it. I tweeted after the 5th inning, or going into the 5th inning, it's early, but Nolan McLean is looking like Nolan McLean again. He had just had that 7-inning start in Cincy, about to be done with 5 scoreless innings against the Cubs, and in the blink of an eye with 2 outs and nobody on in the 5th inning, bing bang boom, 3-run score. The game's instantly tied. Similar thing happens in the 6th inning with 2 outs where he winds up giving up a 3-run home run. So the Mets go from up 3-0 to down 6-3 in what felt like the blink of an eye. McLean implodes again. His, I would say disappointing full rookie season continues. Game 3, the nightcap of the doubleheader was, I think that's the game that everyone will walk away from this series talking about, maybe for the rest of the year, or at least until as long as the Mets live in your head for some reason. Because the Mets made 6 errors in the game, all in the infield, 2 by Semien, as I said before. Bichette made one. Lindor, who did return in this series, thankfully, he made one. Vientos made a really bad one. I think that's everyone. And it was awful. And it just seemed like every time the Mets would kick a ball or boot a ball, Beatty had one in the outfield where he jumped into the wall for absolutely no reason. There's a few other plays in the game that could have been called errors that actually weren't. So the Mets could have added more. I believe the 6 errors in one game is the most for any Mets team since the 1962 season, their first season of existence, and what was longly the worst modern era baseball team in the history of the sport until the White Sox broke that record by a game a couple years ago. So they almost outdid them. Just an awful, awful defensive game. It was the story of that game. And then game 4 here on Thursday, as I'm recording this, I guess one of the better played games by the Mets. Again, this was a 0-0 game going in the 6th inning. And then what happens? The Mets make 2 more fucking errors. So at one point they had made 8 errors in their previous 15 innings, I think. Cost them a few runs, cost Freddie Peralta, who was pitching well. The Mets do wind up coming back to tie the game, not because of Juan Soto, not because of Francisco Lindor, who did not play in the finale. God knows it wasn't because of Mark fucking Vientos or Francisco Alvarez or Brett Beatty. Jesus Christ. No, all 3 Met runs were driven in by Jared Young, who came off the bench, and Eric Wagaman, who also came off the bench. So that game goes into extra innings. The Mets lose. They don't score with the free ghost runner because even when you give the Mets a free runner at second base, they can't do jack squat with it. Soto didn't come up big in a couple of situations. So the Mets lose in 10 innings, their millionth extra inning game of the year, it seems like. And so the Cubs score 4 runs of the game. None of the 4 runs were earned. The first 3 were unearned because of errors. The last one because the ghost runner is not an earned run. So they win the game with 4 runs on and no earned runs. Meanwhile, the Mets score 3 runs in this game, and none of them were driven in by a guy who was in the starting lineup or, you thought would play any sort of major role on this team this year. And that's how the Mets get swept. And their season spiraling, to the surface of the earth. And yeah, it led to them trading David Peterson. I'll get to the Peterson thing in a second, but I do want to start looking at the chat. We got a few things, actually a lot of chats here. So let's go through a few. Well, first of all, we got to start with a super chat from Notorious BSG. What's up, Notorious? This is super generous. We very much appreciate it. So thank you for watching and thank you for contributing. Notorious says, the success that Jeremy Hefner is having with the Braves pitchers after being cast off by the Mets is an embarrassing bow on top of it all right now. Yeah, I mean, everybody kind of freaked out about Antoine Richardson, or they focused on firing Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes. The one kind of underrated guy that the Mets did not retain or actively got rid of in the offseason was Jeremy Hefner. I feel like we almost didn't talk about it that much because the pitching was so bad down the stretch of that season, those last 3.5 months or so. And you look at what has become of the Mets pitching. If you'd believe it, their starting pitching staff is worse than as bad as last year was. And the fact that they had an offseason where they were prioritizing both defense and improving their pitching, although they only got one fucking starting pitcher to do that. And I'm not counting Tobias Myers with the way that they've used him this year. Last season, the Mets starters had a 4.13 ERA. Obviously, could have looked worse if they didn't start off the season well, but still they were so awful in the second half. I think that's a fair ERA for the season. This season, this is as of yesterday, so not including what Freddie Peralta did today, so it might go down a tick. So 4.13 ERA last year, 4.94 ERA for Mets starting pitchers this season. If you want to compare that to the Braves, I can pull this up on the fly real quick. Jeremy Hefner goes to the Braves. Antoine Richardson also goes to the Braves. But I think Hefner has clearly had the biggest difference for any of the Mets coaches that left this past season. So I'm going to pull up the Atlanta Braves pitching stats for their starters. And let's just compare this to where the Mets is at. So as I just said, Mets starting pitchers this season. Actually, let's check the updated stats. 4.97 actually went up, but again, that doesn't. Oh, okay. The 4.94 was before game 2 of the doubleheader. Went up to 4.97, so it should go down a little bit after the stats update from this game. So 4.97 from the Mets. That's third worst in baseball. The only teams that are worse are the Athletics, who are playing in a minor league stadium that is very conducive to home runs, and the Colorado Rockies, who I don't need to tell you where they play. So the Mets are those are the only teams worse than the Mets. The Braves, by comparison, have a 3.81 team ERA for starting pitchers. That's 7th best in baseball. And then just as a team in general, the Braves are 4th in Major League Baseball with a 3.42 ERA. The Mets are 16th because their bullpen has actually been extremely good. So yeah, man, like, it's a great point. I was not upset that they got rid of Hefner. I think a lot of people were kind of just like, yeah, he's been here for a while, and things have been up and down, and the walks are really bad, and blah 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 blah. I think that was a mistake, and people looking for blood, and rightly so after how the season went last year. But I think if you could give the Mets a mulligan on this one, they'd probably take it. So good comment, Notorious. Let's see what else we got here. Madeline Schmidt says, so awful, and ownership does nothing. And then CT Jets fan, this is my dad. Hi, Dad. Goes off that same point. Where is Steve Cohen? We have not heard from Steve Cohen in a while. I don't think he's spoken publicly at all this season, and he has not tweeted since April 23rd, which I think was two days after their 12-game losing streak came to an end. So it has been a while. And then the tweet from before that was the infamous green shoots tweet. Steve hasn't said anything, as the owner, I feel like he probably shouldn't, except for these kind of big touchstone moments where it feels really necessary. He shouldn't be popping his head up every 5 seconds the way James Dolan has the last couple of weeks. But I think there are moments in a season, especially a season that's going the way that this one is, where you do have to address it and address the fans, and you can't wait till the end of the year. I think because the Mets appear now that they are officially in a sell mode with that trade of Peterson, I think once the deadline passes or once the Mets are done with their selling moves, Steve Cohen should put out some sort of statement, either meet the media or send out a tweet or send out a press release and address it with the fans of like, hey, this was unacceptable. This is what we're going to do to fix it. And that be that. And then don't tweet again for the rest of the year because it's pointless. It's a no win game there for Steve Cohen. But I would be very disappointed if he didn't come out and say something and address the fans directly after, whatever they wind up doing happens. But we're still about a month or so away from that. So I don't know that we're going to hear from Steve until they're, well underway, if not finished with that selling process. What else do we got here? Yeah, Michael says the beginning said it all. Yeah, came on the podcast, started it too soon because I was scrambling after the game ended, realized my microphone wasn't plugged in, and I was also live, so I had to turn off my camera, get my technical equipment situated, and then act like that didn't happen, and start the show over again. So glad we made it through. Glad there's a decent amount of you watching right now on both YouTube and Twitter. So we appreciate that. Pantrice, you've been active in the comment section tonight, even before we started. He writes, honestly, can't wait to get rid of Senga, Beatty, and Vientos. Talk about three of the biggest anchors that could be on any team, and we have all three of them. Yeah, man. I mean, Andrew, you know, for anybody who's like a regular listener to the show, he's been talking the last few weeks. He has this line of ass stat where, you know, it's hitters in the major leagues that fall below the league average number. And I think it's for batting average, on base slugging, and OPS, I believe. I could be wrong about one of those. But the Mets for a long portion of the season have had four players who had a below average batting average, on base, slugging, OPS, all of that. And they're the team with the most of them. Vientos is one of those players, and Beatty is another one of those players. I feel like Brett Beatty hasn't gotten a hit in a month. Couldn't tell you what the stats say, but like, you talk about being done with guys. I've declared so many guys that I was done with in the first 3 months of the season on this show. But this team has given me no choice. There are so many Jags on this team between, you know, the three guys that Pantrice mentioned here. You know, Freddie Peralta, he's not a full Jag, but, you know, he's in there. David Peterson, before he got dealt, Jag. Some of these, you know, Craig Kimbrell, remember him? He blew a no-hitter today, a combined no-hitter for the Rays with one out in the ninth. Craig Kimbrell blew it. Didn't even know he was with the Rays. So many guys. Marcus Semien, like all these guys, like it's just full of them. And then Senga, like I just tore him a new one on that Patreon podcast I did the other day. That whole clip is on YouTube for those who aren't subscribed. But yeah, these guys suck. And I don't see a universe where any of the three is on the team this year or next year. And they better not be, man. They better not be. Cool. We'll do some more comments in a bit. I do want to talk about, if I can get this off the screen, do want to talk a little bit about the trade that happened last night, because somewhat significant that after getting swept in their doubleheader against the Cubs and losing the first three of the series, at the time that was their Mets' fifth straight loss. The Mets, I think at about 11:40 to midnight, somewhere around that time, traded David Peterson to the Chicago Cubs, which appears to signal that the New York Mets are officially waving the white flag on the 2026 season. You know, trading David Peterson is not some ace or high profile, high caliber player that the Mets moved, but it doesn't seem like a trade that you make, especially at this time of the year with the state of the Mets rotation, that you do if you're keeping your options open to being buyers or standing pat. I think the Mets have read the writing on the wall. At the time, they were 12 games under 500, and it's now 13, a season worst mark. And you move on from a guy who was the longest tenured Met coming into this season. David Peterson's been with the club since 2020. Now the top five, I believe, longest tenured Mets as of the end of last season are now all gone, between Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Edwin Diaz, Jeff McNeil, and now David Peterson, the top 5 longest tenured New York Mets as of the end of the 2025 season, are all gone. And am I sad to see Peterson go? Not particularly. He was, on the Sunday show, we always do an El Stinko, which is the worst, coach, player, executive, whatever you want to say, of the week. I'm pretty sure David Peterson is running away with that award this year. And even with the fact that he's not going to be on the team for the rest of the year, he might still wind up being the leader at the end with how many he compiled. Peterson this year at a 6.09 ERA. And honestly, as awful, like abjectly awful as that is, I actually don't think it properly says how bad he truly has been. But if you go back a little bit further, because for 3.5, close to 4 months last year, David Peterson was an ace. He looked like an absolute horse, like an old school starter. He was going 7 innings, it felt like, every 5 days. And all of a sudden, in the beginning of August, he hits a complete wall and was never the same the rest of that year. And it completely carried over into this year. In his final 25 starts with the Mets organization, David Peterson had a 7.01 ERA. This guy was the team's ace for more than half of last season. And that is how his Mets career ends. And the Mets get back like a decent prospect, surprisingly for him. Cole Mathis, he's a first baseman, third baseman. I believe he was in college or high school. He was a two-way player. But it seems like he's committed to hitting. He's already ranked on MLB.com's prospect rankings. He's ranked as the Mets' 14th prospect. So, middle of the pack guy with some power. And, it's not nothing. It was more than I thought that they would get back, even if, Cole Mathis doesn't really turn into anything. Because I thought they'd get back some chewed bubble gum and, dirty diapers for David Peterson. So they got a living, breathing human being who is an actual ranked prospect. So that's an improvement. David Peterson's gone. I'm glad he's gone. Well, this is the technical issue from hell episode because my StreamYard crashed in the middle of a sentence. I'm back. Sorry, guys. I'm going to have to edit some of this. This is great. This is the benefits of doing these live. So it's just awesome. What I was saying, if I remember correctly, is I'm just glad I never have to watch David Peterson pitch again. He, at his best, he was really fun. Notorious says stream went the way of the Mets season. Yeah, it has. It seems awfully appropriate. We're in what did Gary Cohen say on Wednesday night? The depths of despair. Not just the Mets, the podcast as well. I'm just glad. I just don't want to watch David Peterson anymore. He was great in 2024 in the role that he was used in. He was awesome. He was amazing for 3.5 months last season, and then he exploded. I have no other way of saying it. He completely fell apart, and he didn't he remind you of like the worst version of Steven Matz, the version of any adversity comes to play, any guys get on base, like it's just going to tailspin into a 3, 4, 5 run inning, and he gets pulled from the game in the fourth, and like that's what it was like watching David Peterson, just excruciating, like broken version of Steven Matz. And And I don't wish any ill will against the guy. I hope he turns his career around with the Cubs. I hope, his free agency is not too much of a bummer for him after the season. But as far as the Mets are concerned, and I, as a Mets fan and Mets viewer and person who made the unfortunate decision to talk about this team multiple times a week, I'm glad that we never have to see David Peterson again. And like I said, the fact that you got any sort of living, breathing person who knows what baseball is back for him is just a benefit. So, it is what it is. Appreciate the memories. He was a homegrown Met. Never did anything, untoward or wrong or anything. Never, I didn't think he ever said anything too crazy. Though he was a little bit, trying to not take accountability at points this season. But, I wish him nothing but the best, and I'm glad that he's gone. It is what it is. Let's go through a couple more chats, and then I think we could probably wrap it up because this is the baseball gods and now the technical gods are truly out to get us. We've had the microphone issue, and now StreamYard has crashed on me twice in the last couple of minutes. So we should definitely start to wrap this up. But let me get to a couple of comments first, and then we can wrap this up because, as I was saying, this team fucking sucks. You're not going to silence me, StreamYard and YouTube and big Mets Andy Martino media out here. All right, let's read a couple more before we get out of here. Junior Swingman writes, why did we rush Lindor back if he can't even pinch hit in a game like tonight's? I think that's a good point, and I think it's probably out of desperation, and I think the Mets let the player maybe even force their hand a little bit. And I think that's one thing you can be critical of the Mets. I mean, there's a lot of things you can be critical over the Mets on right now, but I think that's one thing you can be critical of them on is it doesn't seem like they're particularly strict on play. Like, I feel like they kind of let the players, I don't want to say push them around, but let's just say push them around a little bit. And, if Lindor is forcing his hand, it seems like they might have just, let him lead the way there. But yeah, they say that he's going to play Wednesday. He doesn't play the first game of the doubleheader, which is fine. You kind of expected that. He only had 2 rehab games and a sim game in the minors. Plays the nightcap. Doesn't start tonight, which, again, not shocking, but raised an eyebrow a little bit. But then, yeah, it's a close game. It's a tie game. It goes to extra innings. We see Eric Wagaman. We see Jared Young. Never see Francisco Lindor. So I think it's a valid point, Junior. And yeah, I think it'll probably be like this for this is ridiculous. I'm going to have to really chop this up for the listeners. All right, I'm going to do one more comment if I can find a good one, and then we got to get the hell out of here because StreamYard is coming for me. Yeah, I think that's actually I thought I saw one, but no, I guess not. All right. Yeah, I think we're going to wrap this up because of the Mets being a bad baseball team and the fact that my internet and technology absolutely hates me. But Mets fans, hang in there. I won't say be positive because we can all admit what this team is. They're just bad. They're not making the playoffs. They're not going to be competitive. There's not going to be a magical run or pulling you in or anything like that. Like sometimes it's just a bad year, and this is a bad year. So I'm not going to say be positive. I'm just going to say try not to let it bother you. We'll follow this team in the way that we do. We will continue to talk about them multiple times a week and make it as entertaining as possible for you guys. If you guys have ideas to new segments to do or ways to bring fans in or just like things that you would be interested in watching and listening to, because the recap nature of these podcasts will be a little bit lessened as this team becomes more and more relevant over the rest of the year. Let us know. You can let us know in the comments of this video. You can leave us a 5-star review and rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can leave a comment there and we'll read it. That seamlessly transitions me into just saying that, please subscribe to us if you're not subscribed already on our YouTube. It's just youtube.com/@JustMets is how the links work. Please check us out on YouTube, like the video, subscribe. If you're watching on mobile, you can hype up the video, which is a thing now. And then if you are listening on one of the podcast apps, please give us a rating. Please give us a review. We will read any reviews live on the air in our following episodes. Download the episodes, all that fun stuff. It does really help us out, and we appreciate it now more than ever because this team is such a damn drag to watch. But we're going to be here the rest of the way. I appreciate everybody who's been listening and joining in on the conversation here late tonight, or if you're listening the next day. So let's hang in there. Let's keep watching this baseball team. Let's go Mets, I guess. And I will be back on Sunday for the weekly show with Andrew. So we'll catch you guys later. See you then. Thank you all, and good night.